Transitions of the sine and cosine graph. Above the line are the features of the sine and cosine graph. You can pause the video here and take a screenshot so you have it. You have to know how those work and how these things transform the graph. But I will show you the steps, and I'll use an example to show you the steps to easily find what the graph looks like. So you can use this for questions where it says, draw the graph of this function, or write the function of this graph, or which of the following functions is the graph to the right. You can graph each one of the functions doing it this way. You don't have to graph the whole function and then shift every point. You can just find the starting point and then where it goes from there and then draw the curve. So let's do 2 cosine 1/2 x minus pi over 2 plus 2. That looks like a good one. So number 1, step 1 says mark the midline, which is k. All right, let's draw this. I guess I'm as far scrolled down as I can. Let me try to scroll down a little bit more. Right there, so I get plenty of room to do this. I'll make a nice line here like that. And then I'll use red for everything else. Well, I wanted that one to be black. And then I'll use red for everything else. Here's red. Okay, so it says mark the midline, which is k. Well, the midline is k, which says plus 2. So I go 1, 2 up, and I'll make a little dotted line so that I know that that's the midline. That's where everything starts vertically. That's the line that it's going to fluctuate around at 2. And it says mark the max and min, which is a above and a below. So here's a. We're 2 above, so that's at 4, and 2 below is 0. So that's how high up it's going to go and how far down it's going to go. Then find the period, divide it by 4, use it to mark 4 quarter steps left and right from x equals 0. This may have to be adjusted in step 4. Step 4 is when you find the starting point, so if there's a horizontal shift, we may have to do something with these quarter points. But we're just going to find them now to get kind of an idea of the scale of the graph, how far left and right we have to mark it. So let's see, it says find the period. The period equals 2 pi, that's the normal period of cosine, divided by b. So that's 2 pi divided by 1/2 equals 4 pi. So the period is 4 pi. It says divided by 4. Well, before I do that, let me mark it on here. I think that line looks pretty good in the middle, I think. I'm not a great artist. So I'm just going to mark these, 4 pi and minus 4 pi. Okay, very nice. Okay, and then it says divided by 4, which is pi. And then it says mark 4 quarter steps left and right from x equals 0. Okay, so I can cut this in half and cut each one of those in half. Then I've got my quarter steps. So from 0 to there is pi. From pi to there is 2 pi. From 2 pi to there is 3 pi. And there's 4 pi. And I'm probably going to have to adjust this because there's a shift on this one. Pi over 2 to the right. But I'm just marking it right now, so I have kind of a relative size. So this is negative pi, negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi, and negative 4 pi. Okay, the next step is find the starting point. Use the C, the horizontal shift from x equals 0. If necessary, adjust the quarter points. Shift them by the same amount as the starting point shifted. So I'll do this in green so we can move. All right, the normal starting point of cosine is 0, so it's going to move pi over 2 to the right, which is to pi over 2. That means I have to move each one of my quarter points. These are the places where cosine is going to do its thing. I have to move each one of these by pi over 2. Well, pi is 2 pi over 2, so plus pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2. And then 2 pi, which is 4 pi over 2, plus pi over 2 is 5 pi over 2. And then 3 pi, which is 6 pi over 2, plus pi over 2 is 7 pi over 2. And then pi over 2 from 4 pi, I'll put it in just to be complete, is going to be 4 pi is 8 pi over 2, so this is 9 pi over 2. 9 pi over 2. So that's where cosine's going to do its thing. So now we know the starting point is going to be here, and I'll mark them here. I just won't label them. But that's negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2, negative 5 pi over 2, negative 7 pi over 2, and negative 9 pi over 2. All right, so that's our starting point, pi over 2. What does cosine do at the starting point? It's at the maximum value. Now, if this was negative 2, we'd have to put it at the minimum value. We'd flip it, but this is at the maximum value. And then, according to this, and it says it here, but you know what cosine does. It starts at the maximum value. I'm looking here. And then it goes down, down, up, up. So at each quarter point, it goes down to the midpoint, down to the low point, up to the midpoint, up to the high point. So it looks like that. And then to the left, it says in both directions. So again, to the left it goes down to the midpoint, down to the low point, up to the midpoint, up to the high point. And it'll just keep repeating forever and ever. But now you see what that graph looks like. So if they had drawn a graph, let's say, I know they had just the original graph of sine x drawn in there. So sine x goes like that. So what if they had sine x in there? Well, you know this isn't sine x because it started even at the wrong value. So, okay, that's how you could compare it. Let's do a couple more examples from worksheets, and let me see if I can find worksheets. I think I have to go this way, and I might be wrong. Here it is. So let's do an example from this worksheet, and I'll do one of these. I'll do this one. I'll do this. Yeah, I'll do number 11. So it says, which is an equation of the given graph? Now notice, all of these, well, they have differences. All of them have the same A, the same amplitude. Two of them have -1 for the K, and two of them have +1. Okay, so what should our K be? Well, this thing goes 1, 2, 3, 4, so the halfway is 2, 1, 2, up or down, from the top, up from the bottom, down from the top. So there's our midpoint, or midline. It's at -1. So already I know that these two cannot possibly be the answer. And again, the question I just have to check. It says which is an equation, not which is not an equation. Sometimes it's which is not an equation. So now I know it's got to be either A or C. B and D are eliminated. Let's make sure they're eliminated. So I have my midline. The first step said find the midline. Let me go back here. The second step is mark the maximum and minimum, which is A above and below the midline, or absolute value of A above and below. A is 2 or -2, but its absolute value is 2. So I'm 2 above, which is at 1, and 2 below, which is at -3. So the graph does that. It goes up to 1 and down to -3. So it could be either A or C, but now I've marked it. Then the third step is find the period divided by 4. Use it to mark 4 quarter steps left and right. Okay, when I'm comparing a graph, I don't have to draw, or comparing it to a graph, I don't have to draw the whole graph. I know that the quarter steps for sine or cosine, there is no B in in any of these choices, but there's no B. B is just equal to 1. So the period is 2 pi. It's just the regular sine and cosine. And the quarter points, it's going to go from -2 pi to 2 pi. That's where they want us to do it. And the quarter points are going to be as marked on this graph already. So it starts at 0. It's going to go to pi over 2 pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. So those are already marked for us. Now we can find the starting point and go. Now you might have to adjust if you wanted 4 quarter points to the right. You'd have to adjust from the starting point, but I just need to compare it to this graph. So I'm just going to find the starting point and start drawing it and see if the wave is exactly like this wave. So it says x plus pi over 2 cosine starts at the highest point, at the maximum, at 0. But this one says pi over 2 over. So here's pi over 2 over. And then you know that cosine goes down first to the minimum, or down first to the midpoint, down to the minimum, up. I guess I could scroll over and go up the rest of the way. If I can find my... So cosine starts at the maximum, goes down, down, up, up. Okay, so this is cosine going to the left, down, down, up, up. So, the next step would be up here, and then it would go down again, and so forth. So this is the given graph. A is the answer. Might as well check B, or C rather, just to be complete. A is the answer. I will check C to be complete. So let's see what C has to say with itself. It says minus 2 sine x minus pi minus 1. Well, the midline, step 1, is negative 1. Find the max and min. It goes up to 1 and down to negative 3. And then we know that we've already got our quarter points drawn in, so we don't have to go 4 to the left and 4 to the right, because all we have to do is match this graph. So I've got my quarter points. Sine usually starts at the midline at 0, but this one says minus pi, so I have to go pi to the right. And then it's minus 2 pi. So minus 2 sine rather. So minus sine goes down first. It starts by going down. Well, if this one starts by going down, it's not that graph. So that one's out. The answer to that is A. I will do one more example of this, and let me find it here. I've already got them set up, so I can easily find them, and I want to do... I think this one looks like a good one to do. Write an equation for the graph given below. Now, these sine or cosine graphs with the right transformations, this could be a sine graph, or it could be a cosine or negative cosine, who knows? But you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 up and down. So if I go half, that means the midline is here. So I'm drawing in the midline. The midline is at 2. So now I know I have to do plus 2. Where shall I write this equation? Plus 2. I have to write it somewhere where I have enough room. Now I can make it sine or cosine. I know that cosine starts at the max. Well, and I know the max is 4 and the minimum is 0. So this thing is 2. It goes up 2 and down 2 from the midline. So it's got an A equal to 2. Now, I guess there's a lot of different ways I could do this. Number one, I can look here where it starts, and usually cosine would start at the maximum value. This time it's starting at the minimum value, so I can say minus 2 cosine. Am I going to have enough room? I think I will, if I just do it like that. So I've got to put a B in here, I think. Let's see what the period of this is. I'll look peak to peak. It goes from minus 1 to 1. That is a period of 2. So the period is 2, so I have to find the B. B equals 2 pi divided by the period, which is 2. So B is pi. Oh, of course it's pi, because that's a big, thick thing that I'll have to draw in here. Okay, let me see if I could shift this over a little bit so I can fit that pi in. So there's my pi. And now is this shifted? No, it's not shifted at all. Oh, see, I didn't need such a big parentheses. It's not shifted at all because cosine starts at 0, so I can just put x because there is no horizontal shift. All right, let's have a challenge. I'll do a challenge as one more example, and I'll try to make this a graph of sine. So let me try sine. It could also be sine. Now the midpoint is at 2, so I need a plus 2. And now the challenge is going to be, will I have enough room for all of this if there's a shift over to the left or right? But we'll find out in a second. So the sine is plus 2. The period is 2. I mean, in this graph, the period's 2. I already figured that one out. So we still know that the B has to be pi. So let's see if there's going to be a shift here. And I know I need a 2 in front of sine, because it's 2 up from the midline, 2 down from the midline. So there's the 2. And now let's see what I've got. Usually sine starts at the 0 point. It starts where it's 0 and it goes up. So I could pretend this is it, and I've shifted it. What have I shifted it? Half to the left. So I'm going to have to do x. I'm not going to have room to write it in there. Plus 1/2. So I've shifted it half to the left. And then that would be sine. Shifted half to the left, I would go up, down, down, up, down, so forth. So this is either -2 cosine pi x plus 2 or 2 sine pi x plus 1/2 plus 2. One or the other. I could write dozens of other equations for this, but either one of those would be correct as long as I keep the general format of sine and cosine in mind and how the transformations work, and make sure that I shift things the way that they have to be shifted. And in fact, you know what? I think I wrote the shift backwards. Usually I would be here, but I had to shift it to the right. So that's not x minus 1/2 or x plus 1/2. The original graph is shifted, but this new graph is shifted 1/2 to the right. How come you didn't stop me on that? You should have caught my mistake. So I have to write this new graph from the original graph of sine. And the original graph of sine, to get to the new graph, is shifted 1/2 to the right. So that means I have to do x minus 1/2. Oh my goodness. I was testing you to see if you noticed that. And I barely have enough room to write it in. X minus 1/2 plus 2. Well, I guess the plus 2 is just going to have to stay as it is because I just don't have, well, I think I have enough room to go over a little bit. So let me fix it. It's x minus 1/2 plus 2. So I did my horizontal shift backwards. That happens sometimes. X minus 1/2 plus 2. And again, the reason it's minus 1/2 is I have to write down what the shift is from the standard sine graph. And from the standard sine graph, or just y equals sine x, it shifts 1/2 to the right. So that's minus 1/2. So these two graphs are the same. 2 sine pi x minus 1/2 plus 2, or -2 cosine pi x plus 2. Either one of those would be the answer to this one. So that's all. Get to work. Practice.